What is the worst scandal to happen at your school? Story 1. My high school guidance counselor hooked up with a science teacher's wife, and everyone knew about it. They got a divorce, both teachers still work at the same school to this day, and students will never ever let it go. The story has been handed down from year to year. Similar thing, but this was at my graduate school. The lab head, PI, principal investigator, was married but was having an affair with one of the postdocs. The wife found out and came to the lab to catch the two and let them know she knew. Well, it ended up where the wife chased the postdoc, who was sleeping with her husband, around the lab with scissors. This was in front of everyone, including the numerous shocked grad students. The PI later divorced the wife and remarried the postdoc he was sleeping with. Then, he was able, because he was head of the department, to get his new wife a job as head of her own lab in the same department. 15 years later, they are still professors at the institution and still married, but the story has been passed on throughout the years. Grad students to this day still joke about the shady stuff, and the professors in question get anonymous gifts around the holidays of scissors from random people at the school. It's become a thing, mainly because people still find the situation disgusting and wrong, especially since they were allowed to keep their jobs, and because of the rug sweeping, there's not much anyone can do besides sending those people scissors. The scientific community is not without its sex-related scandals. Not at my school, but at my brother's school, the principal was hooking up with the guidance counselor for an entire year, including on school property, and the whole school knew. To top it all off, the principal was my dad, and my brothers found out from all of the rumors going around the school. They were fired, of course, and my mom divorced him. So now he's moping around this small rural town still with the former guidance counselor because no one will hire him. Affairs are shockingly common among teachers. Story 2. A teacher had an affair with a student. She was arrested and released on bail. Then, a few days later, she sent an email to other teachers saying it wasn't an affair, but that she was actually being SA'd by the student and blackmailed. She even attached screenshots of texts. Later that day, she murdered her husband and committed suicide. Had a similar one back in high school. We had this volleyball coach and assistant principal that everyone liked, accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old from our school. From what I heard at the time, she switched schools after making the claim, and since I wasn't friends with her, I don't know the whole truth, although I did listen to. She might have lied, and that's why she left school. That's all speculation though. I mean, I expected the stories to be dark, but damn. Story 3. A kid in my senior year short story class, who sat directly behind me, was charged with the stabbing, beheading, and burning of one of his friends/drug dealers. I remember the day like it was yesterday, sitting in my short story class when my teacher came in tears because she just heard the news. Students didn't find out about it until later. I actually have a friend who testified in his trial because he purchased the murdering materials at the hardware store that she worked at. Crazy, man. Hey, we went to the same school in the same graduating class. A personal take on this story: I went to a large Catholic high school in the area for 9th and 10th grade before transferring back to PCEP. There was another kid involved in the crime who got some kind of immunity as part of an agreement to testify for the prosecution. I won't name him here since it's been 13 years and I'm sure he's trying to put it behind him, but he helped Orlovich and Letkeman dispose of the body and gave Orlovich clean clothes. I ate lunch with that kid almost every day in 9th grade at Catholic school. I wonder how many murderers I've had lunch with. Story 4. The Harlem Shake was a craze. We had an RE teacher who desperately enjoyed being the popular teacher, so he got in on the craze. Invited 40 pupils from my year to his classroom at lunch and filmed his own Harlem Shake video, which in itself would have been against safeguarding rules. The thing is, he also taught sex ed, so everyone got into his cupboard before the start of the video for props. The video was essentially a group of 14-year-olds throwing dildos and condoms around the room, while he, of his own accord, ground on a life-size cutout of the Pope. He was suspended under investigation for half a year, but surprisingly kept his job. He was a lot more professional when he returned. That teacher made a lot of wrong decisions that day. I mean, it would have been bad enough to grind on a cutout of the Pope whilst your underage students chuck dildos about, but to film it? So stupid. A part of me is glad he managed to keep his job, since I guess it's harmless fun, but that was just a mess up and massive lapse of judgment on his part, especially since I've heard of teachers being sacked for posting inappropriate pictures of themselves on social media and they're simply drinking wine. That's definitely not appropriate, but not that big of a scandal. Story 5. The first week of high school in PE class, the first section was swimming. Wasn't my class, but the class after. This kid was playing a game with his friends in the water who could hold their breath the longest. He was going up for air and hit his head on the pointy part of the gutter, and never made it to the surface. Friends didn't notice. The teacher didn't notice. Eventually, football players coming back to the locker rooms noticed. He ended up dying. The teacher was fired, although I wouldn't fully blame him as he was attending and teaching kids who didn't know how to swim or weren't strong swimmers. One adult for over 60 kids, that's the school's fault. As a lifeguard, I can confirm that even if there is only one person in the pool, 2 of us need to be on the chairs. If that person somehow knocks her head and falls unconscious, we need 2 lifeguards to stabilize her while a third one in the office comes in and brings the dorsal plank. I don't know what it's called in English. While the first lifeguard does the proper treatments, while the last one calls an ambulance. The teacher was fired? Depending on the rules over where you are, he could have sued the school for those high safety risks. 1 person for 60 kids is beyond dangerous. Something similar happened where I'm from. A 13-year-old boy drowned in a pool party a local high school was hosting. The lifeguards were high school students, and the swim teacher was supposed to be supervising them. The boy's classmates noticed he was under the water for minutes and brought him to the surface. When they brought up the boy, they didn't perform CPR until the paramedics arrived, which was too late already. It was a really sad story, and the boy could have survived if only the teacher wasn't so negligent. How did the kids not notice? Story 6. During middle school, a few kids sold weed and someone that bought some smoked it in the building, which was just stupid. The kid that sold it to him didn't want to get in trouble, so he pulled the fire alarm so people wouldn't find the kid. We all got to go home afterward. 200 IQ move. Not my high school, but one where a friend went to. It was either a random drug search or they knew someone had drugs in the classroom. Cops show up with dogs and instruct everyone to leave the room. The kid has weed on him and is definitely going to get caught. He hides the weed in his wallet, takes out everything else, and then drops the wallet in the trash bin. Cops obviously found it, but couldn't tell who it belonged to, so he never got in trouble. Reminds me of one guy at my school. Bought a vial of acid, like 200 separate trips worth. Was given a warning to take a single drop when he wants to trip. What does he do? He downs the entire thing 5 minutes after buying it. Started losing his mind in one of his classes and was taken to a hospital. The dealer went to juvie and is a priest now, which I find to be the funniest part because this dude was the last person I'd ever see as a priest. That fire alarm thing? Super smart. Story 7. A girl in my middle school was telling people she had a hit list of people she was going to kill, got caught with the list and was sent to a hospital for a while. She came back a few years later in high school. I also had a hit list in middle school because I was a dumbass. It was a group of about 30 guys that would come to school and play a kind of tag game. If you were tagged during the day, you were assassinated and the game was over until the next day. My dumbass made a hit list with everyone's name on it. Needless to say, this alerted the principal. I didn't have a hit list, but was accused of having one in middle school. I was being bullied and my dad gave me a little notebook and told me to write the names down of people who bully me that day to make sure they see me doing it. The principal knew of my bullying problem, but my dad failed to tell him about this plan. A student got scared and told his parents I was making a list of people I was going to kill and he was on it. Parents raised hell and I had to explain myself in tears in front of everyone. My stepmom was really mad at my dad about it for a long time. That's a bit disturbing, and I'm just surprised at how many kids make hit lists. Story 8. 2 things. Both were in middle school. One, I was at home on a Sunday watching the news with my mom when all of a sudden my 6th grade teacher's mugshot showed up and it said that she and her husband were pulled over and the police found like 6 pounds of high-grade weed, leading to a search warrant for their home. They literally slept on an inflatable mattress. The whole house was a grow-up. She did look like a hippie, but I don't understand. She was not mellow at all. She was a mess. And in the second, in 8th grade, one of my friend's parents had cancer. He thought it was a good idea to bring some of their meds to school and hand them out like candy. These were strong meds, and not all of them were pain pills. At least 5 kids overdosed. 2 of them had seizures, and no one died, thankfully. Same here, only this girl's mom had breast cancer, and this girl went around telling everyone that she got tested and found out she too had cancer. Like word for word, she told people she had cancer and went to the doctors and all. It blew up around the school. All the teachers got a hold of the rumor too, and eventually she came forward saying that she didn't have cancer and then tried to gaslight everyone by saying she never said she had cancer and it was just a scare, and that all the appointments were for her mom, not her. The whole story made zero sense, and very quickly people learned what kind of a liar she was because she continued crap like this into high school until she got pulled out for a few weeks due to the bullying she suffered from her constant lies. I wonder if that kid went to jail. Story 9. In middle school, 8th grade, early 2000s, one of the hot girls sent a couple of nude pictures to her BF, and it wasn't long until half the school had them. Police ended up becoming involved to make sure all copies were destroyed. In high school, there was a little scandal involving the teachers and a teachers club called the Hot Tub Club. Faculty members that had hot tubs would host a weekly hot tub party with other hot tub owners. Turns out they were all getting wasted and having a swinging party every Wednesday. Somebody's spouse found out about it, and there was a huge exodus of hot tub teachers my senior year. The main people involved with the photo were reprimanded but not charged. The girl had a sit down with a counselor to discuss what happened, and we all had a big assembly to discuss the consequences that could happen if people shared those kinds of images. It scared a lot of kids straight. Nobody was fired from the school for being in the hot tub club. Teachers left because it was convenient timing with the opening of another high school, and there was constant babble about it. Just for clarity, this all happened in a small town in Western Canada. By the looks of my inbox, both are not uncommon occurrences. If the hot tub club only met outside of work, then there's nothing the school should be able to do about it. If they were fired for outside activities, it would be an easy win on an unfair dismissal case. My only guess is that it was a religious school, in which case there was a morality clause in their employment contract, which in my honest opinion should be illegal and unenforceable because as far as I care, what you do outside of your job is none of your employer's business. Story 10. The student hid a pregnancy from her parents. She ended up giving birth at home and killed the baby. It was definitely a messed up experience for everyone. The uncomfortable part is, she supposedly hid the pregnancy from everyone. However, there's a photo of her in the yearbook with her friends, and she is clearly very pregnant. When I was in school, there was a girl who was overweight, and as a result of how she carried that weight, looked quite pregnant. Teachers kept pulling her and her parents into conferences to talk about it, and after however many times it happened, the parents got pissed and got the school to agree that they would no longer alert the parents or counselors if they thought the girl was pregnant. About a year later, she stopped showing up to school. This was her sophomore or junior. There were mad rumors about what happened, that she got involved with some older kids, ran to Mexico and got busted robbing 7-Eleven. Turns out, she had finally actually been pregnant and was attempting to give birth, alone in the bathroom at home before her parents figured it out. I had a friend do this the year after we graduated. I went to church with her, school, and I worked with her. She hid her entire pregnancy, gave birth in the bathtub of her boyfriend's parents' house, and then threw the baby in a dumpster at a gas station. A homeless man rummaging through the trash found the baby dead from exposure. She did this in January. It was pretty shocking. Her mom was a single parent and she had 3 other sisters, all with various mental delays. She was the normal one in the family. My best friend at the time, who ended up dating the father of the baby for a while, called and told me before it hit the news. It was probably the most shocking thing I have ever experienced. Can't imagine hiding an entire pregnancy throughout high school. That's crazy. Story 11. Sophomore year, a girl in my grade passed on a solid yellow up a hill, hit a family in a car, and killed both parents and one of the kids. A week later, she's back at school in a brand new pickup truck and never faced any sort of trial or anything. Her parents were extremely large farmers in the small rural town and had influence in the local court systems, I'm sure. Oh, did I mention she excitedly showed off her new truck when she came back? Reminds me of a kid from my school. Was the designated driver for a bunch of his friends, but spent the whole night sneaking shots and booze. By the time the party was over, his friends were too drunk and he convinced them he just had a sip or two. Cut to 10 minutes later, he bombs around the corner, jumps the curb, and wraps his car around a tree. He walks away. His other friends spend the rest of their senior year in the hospital. One even lost his leg. What was his first post on social media about? Lamenting the loss of his car. This same kind of incident happened at my school. The kid, my age, and his family are well known in a small farming town. He went drinking and driving up a canyon. He rolled his vehicle and killed his passenger. He got praised because he became a paraplegic and was an all-state wrestler, football, baseball player, etc. No charges, remorse, or anything for killing the passenger. The whole school, to this day, he's the assistant football coach, praises him as some sort of town hero. It's disgusting. This town has zero shame. If you have a particular last name, you're forever golden in that town. I have to share at least one more example because now I'm all pissed. Another incident that happened was another football player in my grade and a local gym owner was accused of sending nudes to a high schooler. She and her family were essentially run out of town and no charges were brought on the accused. He has a CrossFit-like gym in town where all the parents bring their kids for weight training, cheer, etc. They all say they believe he would never send such horrific things to a child. I'm pretty sure he was just recently accused of doing it again. Any accusations towards certain families get quietly swept under the rug by the town. Some spoiled kids really can't show remorse. Story 12. A girl died in the pool during an event at the school. The swim teacher was blamed and was prosecuted. The girl who died was in my sister's class. Both were 7 at the time. That happened over 10 years ago, but the parents haven't had another child since. She was their only kid. When a kid goes to school, the school is more or less considered responsible for their safety. That doesn't mean that the school is always going to be legally at fault if something happens. But if it can be proven that harm was caused by the school's negligence, the school can get in a lot of trouble for it. In this case, maybe the swim teacher was not properly monitoring the students. Maybe they didn't follow the required safety protocol. Maybe they didn't take immediate action when they realized something bad was happening. This happened at my daughter's school too. It was a school-sanctioned party at a local recreation facility. The pool was cleared, ambulances came, and parents were called. He was an autistic boy who I believe went down a slide into the deep end and couldn't swim. He was under for a while before lifeguards noticed. He didn't die on the spot, but had to be taken off of life support not long after. It was very traumatic for the kids who were present, and of course his family. If I remember correctly, it was settled quietly out of court. Yeah, no school is gonna get out of letting a kid die. Story 13. A guy in year 10 made a statement that the more compact a group of people are, the higher the death toll would be in a shooting. And we were genuinely talking about shootings, and somehow people mistook it that he was gonna do it. It was a joke and everyone was playing along at first. Cut to 11 months later, he was in year 11, the whole school knew, rumors got out, and the truth was beyond twisted and changed to something different. Kids were actually scared to come in. Parents were pissed and teachers were anxious. They had to search the kid, and they kicked him out 9 days before he finished for good. Was still allowed to do exams, but had to do it separately from everyone else. The police were involved and it made the news, but the news article is completely fake and bullcrap. He also wasn't allowed to prom. This was around 4 or 5 years ago. He told me he was doing a lot better now. He went to a better school for 6th form. He says whilst he has moved on with his life, he will never forgive the bastards. Also, we live in England and guns are much harder to get, especially to the average person who knows nothing about how to get guns. Compared to my school, where the psycho kid actually brought in a knife and the teachers immediately rushed to his defense. He was just joking, he wouldn't actually hurt anyone. Meanwhile, the kids are in tears and one of them is scarred for life after being threatened with a knife. Dude, a similar situation in my school. Some kid on the bus told his friend about a crazy dream he had where someone shot up the school. The girl in the seat behind him overheard and turned him in, and he got expelled. We had a letter sent to our parents telling them about the threat this kid made, and I still have it 18 years later because it was beyond ridiculous. It wasn't a threat. He was just making benign conversation. The admin didn't even try to exaggerate the story. Meanwhile, our principal got in a fist fight with a parent. Half the teachers were hooking up with the students, and our janitor was arrested for trying to sell meth to our DARE officer. Ah, a public school in a small town in the US. I feel really bad for the kid whose school life got ruined because of a joke. That's just an overreaction. Story 14. An overachieving student in my year went nuts and pooped in a bag in a teacher's classroom. She also thought she could run up trees. Turns out she didn't end up skipping a few years and going to uni early like she was predicted to do. A kid in my school who was very smart got great grades, but was also a kind of a weird guy, ended up having some sort of psychotic break while staying up for days on end working on a pretty big assignment for a class I had with him. He was already going above and beyond by making a very detailed video rather than a PowerPoint like everyone else, but before he even played the video for the class, he went on this super bizarre tirade about the meaning of life and all this existential stuff that made no sense for around 30 minutes before the teacher finally got him to stop. Later that night, he was apparently knocking on random doors at 2 a.m. trying to give the people in these homes that same weird speech. Then he went to a psych ward, and I haven't heard about him since. The thing is, he wasn't really showing signs of serious mental health issues before that. It seemed a lot like how schizophrenia generally just hits people. They're totally fine until the first psychotic break, generally around late teens to early 20s. It comes out of nowhere. I really don't think his parents did anything wrong. As soon as this happened, they admitted him to a ward, which was probably the right call. But actually, a little while after I left my initial comment, I remembered an old high school friend mentioning that they saw him once, years after high school, walking down the sidewalk in a wetsuit, flippers, and a scuba tank, so I don't think he's doing all that great. When I was in the 12th grade, there was this kid in my class who was a genius. He was already accepted to any university and had a super bright future. However, he was awkward and a little weird and bullied relentlessly. He shot himself at the beginning of April. Such a tragedy. That escalated quickly. Story 15. I was in the 8th grade at the time, but the high school I would be attending the next year had a massive hazing scandal that made international news overnight. A group of junior girls trying to join the Powder Puffs went to play football against the seniors. Instead of playing, they got the crap kicked out of them, were forced to sit in a huddle on the ground while paint and animal intestines were thrown at them, and one girl even had a bucket put over her head and it was hit with baseball bats. I heard later on that she suffered permanent hearing loss. Someone recorded it. This was before smartphones, so someone had a literal camcorder and released it to the media. The senior girls that were identified were suspended, many of them losing college admissions, and some parents were arrested when it was found out they supplied alcohol. When I started high school, we had to endure multiple school assemblies every year about how hazing is bad, and participate in a week-long seminar about being more caring and considerate of our fellow students. My school had a similar situation, but male students were making paddles in woodshop class and using them to paddle incoming freshmen. These weren't the thin hazing paddles that you sometimes see in movies. They were 2x6s with holes drilled in them and a carved handle on one end. One of the ones that they showed us in our assembly the next year was so big it took 2 hands to wield it. One kid had his tailbone broken from being hit so many times. The football coach was also the woodshop teacher, and he kept his job, but he was no longer allowed to coach football or teach woodshop. Our state champion football program disintegrated. He was allowed to start coaching again a few years ago, and they are almost back at the level they were, and there is no more hazing that we know of. There was also a car accident where one kid died and 2 others were in a coma after a pre-homecoming event. It wasn't school sanctioned, but it happened on the football field. There was lots of alcohol involved, and they were on a winding country road. We also had a girl get hit and die when some high school kids were drag racing. My high school used to have the same paddle hazing for boys. I managed to avoid getting hurt because I had a lot of older friends who made sure I was left alone. But I remember seeing some of the tougher kids in my grade crying in the fetal position after getting paddled. The school never took any responsibility because the hazing usually took place after school and off the grounds. Luckily, the kids seem to be a little bit more evolved these days, and it doesn't seem to happen anymore, as far as I know. We also had a literal fight club in our grade that eventually got shut down by the police. A kid got hospitalized after a fight, and the only repercussions were some in-school suspensions, which the kid who got beat had to attend as well. High school sucked. I'm surprised at the lack of hazing stories. It's just that most of them don't get reported. Story 16. Some students broke into a local elderly reverend's home to rob him, thinking he was away. He sadly wasn't, and they proceeded to bludgeon him and his wife to death while they were sleeping with baseball bats and beer bottles. They were caught pretty quickly, and although their names legally couldn't be published because they were minors, everyone, including the local media, knew who committed the crime. Media caused a circus at our school for weeks, harassing any student for comment. Many did because they thought it was cool. Although these 3 kids, 13, 14, 14 and 15 were known to cause trouble, no one ever suspected they would be capable of doing homicide. A very similar thing happened when I was a kid. This was 45 years ago. A grouchy old man, you know the type, "You kids get off my lawn," lived in an old rundown house. Rumors spread he had money hidden, that's why his house was so poorly maintained. Kids broke in, asked him where the money was, tried to beat it out of him, and killed him. Turns out there was no money. He was just really old and poor, so he couldn't fix it himself or pay anyone. He had kids, but they didn't like him and never came by. The killers in this case, too, were caught almost immediately. Can't remember what happened to them. The guy had a funny name, Mr. Prunier. This was in Western Mass. When I was in high school, 2009, one of my classmates stabbed a friend of mine in the bathroom with a pocket knife over some girl fight. I watched them go to the bathroom during recess, was with other two friends and told them, "Seems like they're going to fight." 1 minute later, there were people running out of the bathroom, one of them carrying my friend. The year after federal forces shot a student outside the uni during a protest against militarization. I was waiting for my brother to come and get me when protesters and federals started to yell at each other. Seemed like a bad place to be, so I just left. A few minutes before the altercation, there was a video when people are trying to get the guy in the car to be rushed to the hospital but couldn't find it. Good God, those ages. That's scary. Story 17. My former high school got on the news for having a history teacher lie for 4 years about being a decorated war hero. Guy claimed to have not one, but 2 Purple Hearts, among other things, and never even served a day in the military. But it gets juicier. The truth came out because his ex-wife exposed him, sending evidence he was making it all up to the local news stations and the school. Why'd she do it? The history teacher was having an affair with another teacher in my school. We had a lot of weird teachers at my school, but I think this story just shows how much the administration hardly vetted teachers. Like, holy crap. We also had a guidance counselor get the boot for being a racist, and that's another story that didn't get as much publicity. We had a similar thing where we have a whole day around the time of Veterans Day where actual vets from every war possible come in and tell their stories. There was one guy who supposedly had been in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, all as a paratrooper, but after him coming to the school for what must have been over a decade, it was found out that he never served and wore his dead brother's uniform and had been up to some shady stuff like kidnapping a child or something of the sort. That almost sounds like a joke from The Simpsons. Story 18. We had a computer teacher / football assistant coach who was just blasted all day and had so many DUIs he had to get rides to work, but was the cousin of the superintendent, so he kept his job. Let's just say that when he crashed a student's car in the parking lot because he convinced them to let him borrow it, that was the beginning of the end of it. It was a small town. The scandal is that the super tried to cover it up by trying to convince the kid to take the heat for it. To no one's surprise, the kid was not convinced. They let him stay on as super for another 2 years. Crazy stuff like this goes on for far longer than most people would expect in small towns. We had a lot of male teachers marrying female students. The gym teacher from my son's school is on his second student bride. Surprisingly, the first one didn't work out. I'd laugh at the ridiculousness too, if 3 of his kids weren't my little cousins. Gotta love a small town. It's crazy how many school districts are full of stories like this. Story 19. One year, on exams day, they were trying to add a new method to prevent cheating where a man from the administration comes to every class before every exam and collects students' phones while sticking a sticker with a number on each phone and giving the same sticker to the student so he can get his phone after school without anyone taking someone else's phone that looked alike or something. This was working at first and a bit preventing cheating until one day, some guy sneaks into our high school and came as the man who collects the phones while he wasn't. He stole the whole high school's phones and went, LOL. Bruh, the exact same thing happened, but instead we weren't allowed to bring phones to school, and one of the head teachers confiscated all phones from the students. They said they won't return it until their parents come to take it back. They had about 16 phones currently with them until someone came, broke open the lock, and stole all of them. The students never got their phone back, and the school never paid the money for it. Not that I endorse this, but that's actually kind of clever. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share, please leave it down in the comments below for us to read. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.